Sam Raimi's become very iconic in Hollywood thanks to his work on the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy. His love for comic books has always been very apparent in his career, and fans are very happy to see him return to the superhero genre with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. However, over 10 years before he directed the first Spider-Man movie, he nearly directed a movie about a completely different Marvel hero in Thor. So, what if it happened? Now, long before he worked on the Spider-Man movies, Sam Raimi would get his start in Hollywood in the horror genre by directing the original Evil Dead trilogy starring Bruce Campbell. However, in between directing the Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness, he worked on a superhero movie that sadly flies under the radar quite a lot called Darkman, a movie which starred Liam Neeson as a scientist who becomes a burn victim and eventually an unlikely anti-hero. The movie was a modest success, and managed to win over both critics and audiences. However, the biggest person that Raimi won over was Stan Lee. Lee absolutely loved Darkman, and he immediately believed that Raimi had the potential to make great Marvel superhero movies, and contacted him shortly after Darkman's release. Now, Raimi was ecstatic to be contacted by him, and he couldn't believe that Stan Lee wanted to work with him. The pair would soon after meet up for lunch, and Raimi would express his desire to make a movie about Thor, and Lee was more than willing to work with him on the character, so the pair would soon get to work on developing a Thor movie. Now, the actual plot details on this movie are sadly non-existent, but I imagine it probably would have been the origin story of Thor, and likely would have been a similar movie to the one we got in 2011. Now, as for the cast, it's hard to say who would have been in the roles, but the rumor mill has stipulated that Brad Pitt may have been in mind to play Thor, while Bruce Campbell might have played Loki, and Liam Neeson might have played Odin. Raimi and Lee would take their idea for a Thor movie over to 20th Century Fox in 1991, but they were immediately denied. You see, Fox just didn't think that superhero movies were enough of a financial guarantee, and it might be silly looking back at that, but it's honestly kind of hard to blame them, considering that most superhero movies back then weren't great, and the ones that were Superman and Batman, who were two global icons that transcended the comic book medium. Thor, on the other hand, was a much more niche character by that point, and his last appearance in The Incredible Hulk Returns really didn't amount to much fan excitement. So now, before I give my thoughts on the movie itself, I have to talk about what I think the implications of this movie happening would be. First of all, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies would obviously never happen. So yeah, Tobey Maguire would never have played Spider-Man, because it was Raimi that wanted him to play Spider-Man. Everybody else thought he was crazy. So that wouldn't have happened. And then there's the fact that Thor would never have been in the Avengers, because you know how the X-Men and the Fantastic Four were not in the MCU until now, because they were over at 20th Century Fox, which is now a Disney company. But back then it wasn't. So if this movie had been made, the same thing would have happened with Thor. Fox would have owned the rights to Thor, and Thor would not have been in the MCU. And that would have been a big problem, I feel, because, you know, they were able to get away with not having characters like Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, and the X-Men, because they're not always members of the Avengers. They're not really part of the core lineup all the time. They're kind of off and on again members of the Avengers, so they were able to do it without those people. But Thor is a founding member of the Avengers, and I do imagine that the hole he would leave would be felt by comic book fans. I'm sure they could do it without him, don't get me wrong. I'm sure that they would just replace him with somebody else. Maybe they would move Ant-Man up, because Ant-Man was a founding member of the Avengers in the comics, so maybe Ant-Man would have debuted in the Avengers instead of a solo movie in this timeline. I don't know. Or maybe they would have, offered Sony more money to bring Spider-Man into the MCU earlier. I don't know. But Thor would not have been in the MCU, at least not that early. Like, when the Disney-Fox merger happened, Thor would be one of the major characters coming over that people would be excited to see. He wouldn't have been in the MCU for 10 years already. He would have only just been coming into the MCU now, which is crazy to think about. So Chris Hemsworth probably would not have played Thor in this timeline. So now, my thoughts on the actual movie itself. Awesome. Just awesome. I mean, what else is there to say? Sam Raimi has yet to do a comic book movie. I'm not counting Spider-Man 3 because I don't think that movie's his fault. He has yet to do a superhero movie that wasn't great. Okay, even Spider-Man 3, which is not the best movie in the world, is only bad by Spider-Man standards. I think if you don't compare it to the really good Spider-Man movies, it's actually still a decent movie, at least in my opinion. And as I said, Darkman was great. I'm sure Doctor Strange 2 is going to be great. Knock on wood. Hopefully it doesn't suck and this video becomes really dated. Hopefully it's as great as people think it's going to be. But Sam Raimi, the guy is a huge comic book fan. It's very obvious he actually gives a shit. And I really do think that if he actually, because seriously, Stan Lee did not approach him with the idea of a Thor movie in mind. Stan Lee literally asked him, what Marvel character would you like to make a movie about? And Sam Raimi said Thor. He chose Thor for a reason because he had an idea for one. He was connected to the character. He wanted to make a movie about Thor. So I think with that kind of passion involved, it's hard to say that this movie would have sucked, because it would definitely have not sucked at all, I don't think. I think this movie would have been fantastic. It would have been mighty, for lack of a better word. It would have been so good, I'm sure. I don't know if the casting rumors are true. I don't know if Brad Pitt would have played Thor. I don't know if Liam Neeson would have played Odin. I sure as hell don't know if Bruce Campbell would have played Loki. I really don't know. But if you want my opinion on those casting choices, I think they'd all be great, honestly. I think that Brad Pitt, that guy can do a good performance in his sleep. I have yet to see a movie of his that was, where he was bad in it. Let me know in the comments if he's had any really bad performances in his career, because so far I have yet to see any bad performances, that is. I've seen plenty of his movies. I just haven't seen any bad performances yet. Liam Neeson, seriously, what a voice that guy has. He played Zeus in Clash of the Titans and Wrath of the Titans, and he owned that role. He didn't have much screen time, but he owned the role. Like, he felt convincing because of that powerful voice he has. And honestly, even though he would have been pretty young by this point in time, and maybe a little too young for the role of Odin, I'm sure they could have aged him up. And that voice, man, I really do think he would be a very commanding Odin presence. I think he would have been a fantastic Odin, I really do. And Bruce Campbell is Loki. I know some people are going to laugh at that, but I actually think he could pull it off. He kind of does have that devilish grin. I could imagine him playing an evil character, an evil trickster character that uses his charm, to manipulate people. I really could imagine him doing that. I think he'd just be a fun character to see on screen. Bruce Campbell's version of him, I mean. I think he would have fun with it. I think he'd really bring something to the character that would be fun and enjoyable. Would he be as good as Tom Hiddleston? Probably not, but he would be fun. He'd probably get a good time out of it, at least, and we'd probably enjoy watching that. Honestly, I'd enjoy watching that. And with Stan Lee involved creatively, as long as Fox didn't creatively interfere, which I'm not sure if they would, hopefully, because for every X-Men they did, they had a Fantastic Four, cough cough. So hopefully this would be good. I mean, it would be made in the early 90s, and it would need a big budget in the early 90s to look good. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know how good the costumes would look, because, the Thor costume in The Incredible Hulk Returns sucked. I'm not gonna lie, it looks terrible. But it was a TV movie, so the budget wasn't the biggest, you know what I mean? Now, this is a theatrical movie, and I like to think that maybe Fox would have given this more money. But again, as I said, it's such a niche character at the time, so I really can't say for sure if they would have given Sam Raimi and Stan Lee the budget they needed to really bring this vision up to the spectacle it needed to be at. I really don't know. There's a lot of factors involved. Do I think this movie would have been good? Probably. As long as there was no studio interference, I think this movie would have been good. Even if the budget was low, I still think Sam Raimi would do something amazing with it. Now, is it worth being seen if the Spider-Man movies are not being made and Chris Hemsworth's Thor is not happening? Honestly, no. in my opinion, no. Like, okay, as I said, I would love this movie to happen, but if it made it so that the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies never happened, I'm out already. Then you add in Chris Hemsworth's Thor, and Chris Hemsworth was born to play Thor, in my opinion. That's a double no. Like, it doesn't feel worth it to me. But let me know in the comments down below. Do you think it would have been worth it? Would you have sacrificed the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies and Chris Hemsworth's Thor for, Sam Raimi's Thor? Would you have sacrificed it for that? Let me know about your opinion on that in the comments down below. I can't talk today. Also, give this video a thumbs up and share with all of your friends on all your various social media platforms. And speaking of social media, don't forget to follow me on Instagram, Rinzler_Productions. I'll see all of you in the next video.